Well, greetings. It's just about 11 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm Professor Tamer Çavuşkin. Have the pleasure of welcoming you to our ongoing webinar series in international business education. This series has been running now into our third year. We started in April of 2020. For you folks in international business education and education in general. We have been running these webinars with informed leaders in education, business practice, and trade policy, and so on. And each one has been a value-added contribution, we believe. The webinar series that we have been running is sponsored by the CIBER. CIBERs are Centers for International Business Education and Research. In particular, the consortium is known as the MSI, Minority Serving Institutions Consortium of 10 CIBERs, including Georgia State University CIBER, which organizes and provides these informative sessions for you folks. We have now another one in the series. Before I get into the topic and introduce briefly the speakers that we have today, I'd like to mention that if you are a returning participant in our webinars, welcome back. And I know there are several new names there that we see. We hope that you come back. We certainly have created a worldwide audience. Today as well, we have folks from not only North America, but Europe, Middle East, and elsewhere. So do come back. And please also share these video recordings. These webinars are recorded and are available to you on our YouTube channel or Georgia State CIBER channel. So please share them with your colleagues. And when you exit this session today, there will be a brief survey, 5 questions. Please respond to those because we take a look at them and look at our future programming based on your feedback from our participants. And finally, everyone except the panelists is muted in the webinar. But you're welcome to use the Q&A for your questions and comments. Please use the Q&A button rather than the chat button. If you need to communicate with one of our talented staff people, Ms. Paula Huntley, Michael Wallace, please use the chat. Otherwise, please use the Q&A. We have, of course, these webinars go very, very quickly. We have about 50 minutes available to us, and we'll be monitoring comments and questions coming from you and try to respond to those as we get into our discussion. So let me just turn to today's topic, which is a very exciting topic. I'm certainly looking forward to learning a lot myself. Digital technologies and multimedia in higher education. There's so much innovation and novel tools that are becoming available in education, international business education, in particular, general education in general, obviously. So we'll be discussing trends, tools, pedagogical approaches, and we have 3 very experienced panelists who joined us today. I'd like to welcome each of you, Professor Nükhet, Dr. Tracy, Dr. Kristen Weatherby, and Dr. Tracy Polzer. I'm just gonna briefly introduce Nükhet, Dr. Vardar, and ask her to introduce our 2 panelists, Kristen and Tracy. So Nükhet, who has been on our webinar series in the past, of course, is an educational innovator. She has been in education for many years, is a business professor. In recent years, she has established this consultancy, educational technology consultancy, named as LEZ Communications consultancy and has been devoting her time to developing and sharing many tools that we can use in our teaching. And Nükhet, you are based in the UK for some years now. Welcome, Nükhet. I'm going to ask you to say a few things about our two panelists, and then we'll get on with the communication here.
Greetings from London. Thank you, Hoca, for the lovely introduction. And we're really honored to be here today with the panelists. And we're also looking forward to this webinar. Like you said, my name is Nükhet Vardar. I'm the director of Elize Communications Consultancy, which is an edtech company based in London. As our panelists must be aware, we've got a wider scope today for our webinar, and we will be looking into not only into international business, but as I said, it has a wider scope than IB. Because today with our panelist speakers, we will be looking into the use of digital technologies in education. And we will be looking at education at different levels, starting with early school years, going all the way to higher education. Furthermore, we would be looking into use of multimedia in education. Basically, because we know that with COVID, teaching patterns have changed a lot. Learning patterns also accompanied those. Therefore, with the use of multimedia becoming in our daily life, we started seeing more examples of it. Therefore, we thought it would be a good idea to look at the effects of pandemic also in teaching practices in the pedagogy. I don't want to, extend the introductions, but very briefly, I would like to introduce our speakers to you. Tracy Polster is an educational specialist and a trainer for educational support and innovation based at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands. She has a diverse educational background across the globe, working in different continents, in different countries. She has worked extensively with educational instructors, providing training and coaching to integrate technology into their teaching. She's a well-known speaker in the area of educational innovation. Actually, I've met Tracy virtually last year at a conference where she was making a presentation. I was very much impressed with the contents of her presentation as well as the way she has presented. So welcome, Tracy. I'm sure you will be sharing your wonderful thoughts with us today. Our next speaker is Dr. Kristin Weatherby, who is the director of Weatherby Education Studies in London, UK. Kristin has got her PhD in education studies, and she's a senior educational professional with 20 plus years of experience in technology and education institutions, including the OECD, UCL's Institute of Education, and Microsoft. She currently advises governments, multinationals, and industry in areas of education technology and teacher policy through her own consultancy company. I know Kristin a couple of years back when she was at University College London, working as a postdoctoral researcher there. And she was one of the researchers at the Educate program, which was a mentor program for edtech startups. And I was taking part in that program with my startup company. So I know that Kristin is a devoted academician for evidence-based research techniques and tools. So welcome, Kristin. I'm sure you will be talking about how passionate you are about education and here today. Let us start with the broader topic of use of digital technologies in education, and in general, not only for higher education, but in general about at all levels. So I would like to start with Kristin, talking about the current trends in digital technologies and how they're used in education.
Thank you so much, Nükhet, and thank you, Tamar, as well. I'm thrilled to be here, and I really appreciate the lovely introduction and invitation. So I work primarily in primary and secondary education, as Niket mentioned. So I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing in terms of trends. And of course, post-COVID, everybody's online using Microsoft Teams or some sort of online communication like Zoom, like this. And I'm not going to talk about that. One of the things that I have seen a lot working with startups and also just even reading academic research these days is the trend of online tutoring. There is a huge online tutoring market that is all the way through primary and secondary education and higher education as well. And I just wrote a blog about online tutoring the other day. And so I know I'm not imagining this. I've seen so many new startups. They're still coming on the market talking about online tutoring offerings. A data platform that we use here in Europe called Dealroom has global data on startups, and they have said that VC funding for online tutoring startups increased from $836 million in 2018 to a whopping $11 billion combined in 2020 and 2021. So it's absolutely massive. The largest ed tech startup in Europe is actually an online tutoring company called GoStudent, based out of Austria. And they book in excess of 1.5 million online tutoring sessions per month. And then the other example I would give about online tutoring is from the UK. Our government, the Department for Education in England, has invested 5 billion in its national tutoring, 5 billion pounds in its national tutoring program to help catch up on learning losses due to COVID. And part of this involves in-person tutoring, but a lot of it involves online tutoring. And the question that I ask is, why is everybody banking on online tutoring at the moment? And I think it's because there's so much research on in-person tutoring and its benefits for student achievement in primary and secondary students, that everybody is jumping on the bandwagon to see if they can take advantage of those benefits and reduce some of the barriers that are caused by in-person tutoring, such as, high cost, time, distance, finding applicable, appropriate tutors in your local area. So online tutoring is great, but there's a lot of it right now. Do I have time for one more example, Niket?
Yes, of course.
The other thing that I would mention that I'm seeing a lot of in primary and secondary education technology is artificial intelligence. I see it everywhere. Just companies mentioning that they use artificial intelligence, whether they truly do or not. But it's in education in the school years, it's about creating a personalized learning experience for students. And so that students can either learn independently and the learning path is tailored towards them, or so that teachers can get data or school systems can get data and identify through complex algorithms within the program whether students are having learning difficulties before those become real problems, or teachers can use the data from these programs to group like students together and stuff like that. But the other issue that I would mention about these types of programs is ethics, and I'm not going to go into the ethics of AI in education because it's a very big topic. But one of the things that I've seen in particular with some companies in the UK is around just training the algorithms that are needed for these applications. And of course, to train these algorithms, you need massive data sets. And if you're a startup and you want to use AI, you don't have access to that many users to properly train your algorithm. So one of the ethical issues that we're seeing in the UK, which I'm sure exists in other places, is startups who are training their algorithms using their brand new customers' data. And when you're talking about data of children under 18, it becomes an issue. So I think those are my two examples of ed tech trends. And of course, I mentioned the issues associated with them as well.
Thank you, Christine. At this point, I would like to turn to Tracy, because we know that she's been training actually university professors in the use of digital technologies. So Tracy, what would you say about use of digital technologies in higher education institutions by university professors?
Yeah, so thank you also for the lovely introduction and for the great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm only speaking from my own perspective at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands, and other Of course, I follow other instructors in different groups on social media, in different journals and different feeds and streams. What I see happening, especially at my university, is we're really focusing more on offering better designed, higher quality education. And one of the things that really came out of the pandemic was that we started to make better use of our learning management system, which seems like something really basic. But previously, I think many people were using the learning management system just to perhaps post their syllabus, some readings, and there was so much more that could be done with that suite of tools that people didn't even really think about using as a way of improving the quality of education. Then when Corona happened, of course, we were forced over the course of a weekend to move to online education because here in the Netherlands, we thought things were going to be okay here. I think we were all in denial. Then on Friday, it was announced that the following Monday, we would have to go 100% to online education. That was really a shock for everyone. I was so impressed by how teachers stepped up and just did it. It was really amazing to me. And of course, they were, spending their first amount of time in something we like to call emergency remote teaching, which was just doing the best they could with what they had and what they knew in the moment, and gradually over time improving their own professional knowledge around how to better use some of the tools that they had access to within the learning management system, like a Swiss Army knife of tools in a way. We also started to make use more of the collaborative tools that we had. So we are using Google Workspace in our organization, and previously a lot of people were not really using the power of the collaboration tools. And because now we weren't in a physical classroom together, that became something that we could really make use of well in an online setting. So people started to make experiments with that. Of course, video, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. So we had a lot of people experimenting with using video in a whole variety of ways, not just in terms of posting a lecture, a 3-hour lecture recording, but really getting creative in how they used it to improve the quality of learning as well. Yeah, and I think now the biggest challenge for us is to continue with that forward momentum, because definitely really well-designed courses, especially when they are blended or partially online, they take more time to design. It's usually a front-loaded effort. And a lot of people say that once it's done, that it saves them time in the end. But we see a lot of fatigue with teachers because they've really been pushing themselves to continue to provide good quality education for students in a really challenging time. And so they don't have a lot of energy left at this moment. But a lot of them now, the things they experimented with, they want to keep doing. So there were a lot of positive consequences out of a negative situation where people said, this is something I've been thinking of trying for a long time. And it was sort of on the corner of my desk for the when I had time moment. And this really pushed them to experiment with the things that they had been wanting to try, some of them, and they will keep using them in the future. So that those are some of the things that I noticed, at least at our university.
Those are excellent comments. Thank you so much, Kristen and Tracy. Nüket, if you allow me, I'll just comment, maybe ask a question as well. Yeah, so thrown into this abruptly, which is what happened, of course, as we faced the health pandemic, we find ourselves to be very unprepared and concerned and all that, but we somehow managed it. And Tracy, you are right. By now we're kind of fatigued about the whole thing. But I'm thinking of maybe new scholars, new faculty who are getting into higher education. They need to invest a lot of time, as you said, into learning management systems, collaboration tools, and so on. What's the best practice there? I mean, what would you recommend young faculty? How do they go about this? I mean, so this is an additional task called upon the faculty person who needs to be a content expert, specialist, right? You need to know your subject matter. All of a sudden, we find that, well, that's not enough to be an effective faculty communicator and an educator. So you also have to invest a considerable time into these new educational technologies and multimedia tools. What have we learned there? I mean, what really works best in terms of quickly getting going with these tools?
Well, I can start if it's okay. Something, I mean, that I think is very special about my university is the department that I work for. And maybe I'm a bit biased there, but my department is called Educational Support and Innovation. And we're the central support team for all university instructors at our university and every faculty. And so we're a team of educationalists and pedagogical didactical specialists. So we are there for any instructor who wants to improve the quality of education. That's our mandate, is to support teachers with that at our universities. So they can always come to us. We offer a lot of different trainings and things, but we also do one-on-one consults with teachers in order to help them better design their courses so they don't have to feel so alone. And also because they don't always have that background knowledge and training in order to do that. Many people come into the university arena, and of course they are so skilled in their content and research fields, and many of them then are told you teach 30 to 50% of the time now, and they say that's fantastic. I've never had any instruction in how to be a good teacher, and so we try to assist with that. We also have some really talented faculty support teams in some of our larger faculties, like our faculty of science and engineering and economics and business, and they have some wonderful people also who support directly the teachers in those specific faculties in addition to what we're supporting them with. So having those instructional teams is really key, I think. I think also at a university level, there needs to be some value placed on teaching and time given for teachers in order for them to improve their skills, if that's something that we say we value.
Niket or Kristen, would you like to add?
Let me just add a couple of things. I mean, apart from if you don't have instructional teams, like maybe at the University of Groningen, there is also a lot of material that has already been published. I mean, there are some classic works that have been published maybe since 1990s in the area of multimedia in learning and how to actually, how to do these things. And the research behind it, because what are the rules that we need to stick to in order to be able to create multimedia that would also be that will also have educational value. One such work that I can really think at top of my head is Edward Mayer and his colleagues' work, which they have started publishing, if I'm not mistaken, starting with 1990s, and they're still continuing updating and upgrading their, of course, their research. It's all research based. I will, in a minute, I will also share their, the citation in case some of our participants might be interested in picking up their work. And I think that would be a very good start. For example, when I was trying to develop my tools, my video cases, that was one of the first research that I have read, and they have very practical tips as well in, regarding how to produce these, how to use multimedia effectively for learning purposes. I don't know about, that would also be very interesting to hear maybe from Christine regarding, how secondary schools teachers actually try to cope with going digital so quickly, so all of a sudden with COVID.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I don't know if they did cope so well everywhere, but one of the key things that Tracy's mentioned is just having the time away from teaching to be able to attend professional development or get mentorship help or that kind of thing. And that's where a lot of teachers in a lot of countries struggle, especially in the United Kingdom where I am, where and Japan, where teachers spend longer hours in front of the classroom teaching than in most of the other countries, according to the OECD's TALIS data. And if they're just teaching all the time, they don't have time to actually learn what they're supposed to do or try new pedagogies. Or there's a lot of practices in other countries like Singapore, for example, that are more forward thinking around technology, or have been over the years, where they allow teachers to kind of struggle and fail and have mentorship and practice these things, because we teach students, and students need to practice the new skills that they learn, but teachers need to do the same. So we need to give them those opportunities. But also for teachers especially, and Tamar was talking about new teacher or new academics, this needs to be in initial teacher training. I mean, we need to rethink initial teacher training in most places to include some version of online hybrid distance learning and the technologies that go with it, and the pedagogies as well.
Yeah, excellent. One of our ongoing challenges with online tutoring, online teaching, is the student engagement. That continues to be a concern. I mean, not just in-person teaching, but maybe more so in online teaching. What are there good solutions there? Are there good tools? Are there good experiences that we can share with our colleagues here? Kristen or Tracy or Nuket?
I can just kind of give a general example. I just worked on a report for the OECD on distance learning in the Gulf states. And we had a recommendation in there about how to kind of design, there's lots of research literature on this, how to design successful online learning experiences. But one of the key ones is you don't want to move away from the key good elements of pedagogy from in-person learning. So, it's important for students to be able to work together as groups. It's important to have kind of inquiry-led, interesting, for secondary education, project-based kinds of experiences, so that students feel like they are discovering the knowledge themselves and they're interested in the topic. So keeping those kinds of pedagogies in online learning. I think what happened in COVID, at least at the very beginning, it was very easy in secondary education to just send out Word documents and PDFs of worksheets that students would work on independently. And then it in some places started to evolve, and some of these practices that are used in class were able to be used online as well. But those kinds of things we really need to keep including to keep student interest.
Excellent. Nuket or Tracy?
For me, one thing especially is in regard to having students engaged. I think there are some work, there's some recently published research showing that actually engagement can increase via online teaching compared to traditional methods of teaching. But I think it all really depends on how it is done and what do we really mean by online teaching. Because at the very beginning of COVID, we know that it was a state of emergency, and all educators had to, turn their materials into online teaching, and that was done in a bit of rush, as we all know. So maybe, and then afterwards, it's after 2 years, people had time. So all of the educators had time to improve the quality of the online material and how they conduct these sessions. Therefore, the research shows that, some of the research shows that, especially if it is for discussions, for having more students participating in class discussions, online teaching could actually have some pluses compared to conventional way of teaching. But as I said, it's a shift of paradigm. If we can do that, and if we can deliver the quality properly, I think we could actually have better results. But I think quality is there always at the top of my mind. And I think we should also be addressing that as educators, because we should not be letting go of the quality. But how do we deliver it within a short period of time? That's another question, I guess. I don't know what Tracy would like to say.
Yeah, I
Great.
can add a little bit to that. So I think also it's important when we're talking about student engagement to ask the students also themselves what is working well for them. I was reading a study that was done here in the Netherlands of 12,000 Dutch students, and it came across very clearly. They said, please keep the video lectures, the shorter knowledge clip style lectures, but we want to be together for tutorials and other types of classes where it's more interactive, when we're having discussions and conversations and negotiating understanding and all of those types of things where we want to be in a room together. So that's maybe not possible for all of our teachers to follow through with that, but it's certainly something to consider in terms of what the messages our students are saying really worked for them. Also, it was interesting. I was just watching a presentation of two PhD students here at our university medical center that is part of our university. They were studying the effects of COVID on the learning of first and second year medical students, and also their social networks. And they found that social networks shrank during COVID, but they actually found that the academic achievement increased, which was sort of an interesting paradox. Why would one go down and the other go up? So they were attributing it more to perhaps the ability to watch the videos over and over and review and rewind and watch in your own time, that may have been part of the reason. Of course, they need to do more research into that hypothesis, but it was interesting because they were asking the students directly themselves a lot of questions about their learning. And so I found that really interesting as well. A last strategy was that teachers really started to focus on humanization of their courses. And we base this always on evidence that we find in the literature, evidence-based research. Different strategies like screencasting for video feedback and things like that. But also just even simple things like creating an introduction video or having students create introduction videos. You can use a variety of tools for that, like Flipgrid, or even in your learning management system. You have the ability in discussion forums to leave videos in some of them. And so just creating a sense of community, even though you weren't in a room together, and how that really made students feel more welcome and engaged. And again, these are a lot of strategies that even teachers going back to physical classrooms now have said, oh, we want to keep building this piece in because it felt nicer for all of us, not just the students, but the teachers.
Thank you, Tracy. Those are excellent tips we can all use. There are some comments and questions now coming into the Q&A. A short one, perhaps we can respond to each of you, our speakers. One of the participants asking for recommendations on free tools that educators can use in order to design interactive tasks to be delivered on Noodle. Perhaps you have some recommendations there. One of our colleagues, Milan Shrikande, is talking about hybrid teaching that combines synchronous and asynchronous. And Tracy, you actually talked about the value of in-person, combining in-person and online as well. So what experiences do we have there? Those, the combination in a sense, or hybrid teaching, the advantages, disadvantages, but maybe more so along the best practices. If any of you can comment on that, that would be great.
I'm happy to just start. And I'm not a Moodle person since I'm primary, secondary, so I will leave that one, sorry. But in terms of hybrid learning, there's a model that you've probably heard of, this flipped classroom model that has been around in the US for quite a while and was made famous by the Khan Academy schools. And I think because of COVID and because, as Tracy said, of so many online, so many video lectures and that kind of thing. It's become more popular in the schools, especially secondary schools and late primary. And so what that enables teachers to do is, instead of standing in front of the class and lecturing while the children are at school, they assign for homework a video lecture, or at least some, PowerPoint with accompanying video that presents the new content to students. And then the students do the work they would normally do as homework alone by themselves in their room with no one, or at their house with no one to help them in the classroom. So they're able to apply their learning in class, working with their peers and getting help from the teacher, rather than being stuck at home trying to ask mom and dad for help and mom and dad don't understand it. So that model is really starting to pick up more and more. And I think that's quite an interesting one that makes use of both in-person and virtual education.
Excellent, thank you. Tracy or Niket, would you like to comment on those hybrid or flipped classroom trends? And
let me say a couple of words about synchronous and asynchronous online teaching and learning. I think, and the use of multimedia in these environments, I think, especially at the moment, for example, I'll talk about my own experience with video cases and how they can be used in synchronous and asynchronous environments. We all know that today's students, especially in synchronous environments, they like to have variety. So with video cases, you can actually have that quite a bit, because with video cases, you can start a class with a video case and maybe have just a clip of the case. And then you can stop it, and then you can have a lengthy class discussion. Let me also very briefly say a couple of words on what I mean by video cases. When I say video cases, it's standalone video cases, and they are intentionally developed to be used within a class environment as a textbook information. So it's not like any sort of a executive video that you can find a lot at YouTube, but these are written by lecturers in order, with the intention that they will be used in a classroom environment for example, for international business or for marketing. Those are the two that I have been involved so far. So I can say a couple of words in that regard. And with those, maybe if you've got something like 13 or 12 different video cases, that would mean that you can actually cover an entire curriculum by using those video cases. And then you can relate it to theory. So that actually gives quite a bit of variety, because also with student engagement, again, that helps. It also helps with to the lecturers, because that means that there's going to be quite a bit of discussion in the classroom, because you are giving a new material to students, and you can actually use those videos in a lot of different ways. And you can always pause and then, maybe include a little bit of textbook information, so that again, when students are engaged, it's much easier to give them a bit of theory. In the chat, I will also add those two different resources that were created for marketing. Initially, the one that I've created was for marketing, called Brands Whispering, and the other one is was developed for international business, called Multinationals Whispering, with a number of colleagues, which is a free source. I'll add them in the chat in case our IB colleagues are interested in them.
That'll be very helpful. Thank you, Niket. There's a few other questions and comments. Our colleague Jorge Fernandez is talking about the scenario where the technology doesn't work right for the faculty person. It happens, it can happen. And this speaks to the importance of having, good IT and educational technology folks around you, helping you, but it also means you have to invest a lot yourself, right? I mean, with these tools, there's a lot of learning. So it does require commitment of time. But do you have any quick tips on that? Any of you, or should we go on to the next comment here? There's an
That's a tough
interesting,
one.
yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, just investing in technology. I think that's the new requirement, right, for educators, not just be content expert, but also invest in these new tools and keep investing, because new tools are coming around the corner as we every day. So I think keeping up with that is part of the challenge. And there's a related comment here. One of our participants is saying, any recommendations on how to handle faculty members who feel or perceive the digital training or trainers as condescending due to their superior background with the digital space? Well, I think the best way is to see them as your partners, right? I mean, and try to learn from them as best as you can. But if you have any comments, questions there, please share them. There's also interesting discussion here by one of our participants, James Obiladan, publishing, in this new educational learning, especially, bringing back experiences from your online tutoring, online teaching, and perhaps engaging in experiments and writing about, let's say, effectiveness of different approaches and effectiveness of students handling online learning. This provides, I think, a new opportunity for colleagues to get their publications in the type of journals that value advances in educational technology, right? And learning. What would you have, what can you suggest along those lines? I mean, this, I think, this opens up a new opportunity for colleagues to get published. And I see now more and more pedagogy journals becoming available. So the outlets are also there. But do you see any trends there? Any suggestions, Kristen, Tracy, or Niket?
I think Tracy is having some sort of a technical problem, and she says her connection has failed. So I don't think we have her. Wait, she's probably trying to connect. Oh, she's there. Yeah. Let me just very briefly answer your question, and then I don't know what maybe Kristen and Tracy, if she's heard, has got something to say regarding your question. I feel personally that the education side was neglected for many years because publish or perish motto. Of course, publishing and research is very important, but I think I always felt that those two, teaching side and, like you said, teaching side as well as the research side, should be motivating each other, rather than it shouldn't have been either or situation. But unfortunately, over the years, lecturers were forced to choose one of them. And just like you said, maybe because of the conditions that we were in, pedagogy started getting more attention. And I think rightly so. I think we should be, in order to be able to have good researchers, I think we should be paying more attention to the pedagogy side of it, because you cannot really, researchers are not born, but they're also trained to be researchers. And if you see good, I think I was very lucky. I always had very good teachers. I think you have to have good role models in order to be able to also excel in research. That is my personal feeling.
And
Christine,
I'd like to
what
thank,
would you say?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Maurice Starkey, who shared some useful electronic mind maps for delivering international strategy theory. Maurice has shared the websites where these are available. So that's wonderful. So maybe continue the discussion, and we have a very limited time left here. Well, what do you see in the future? I mean, what are the trends? I mean, Kristen kindly talked about some of the trends at the beginning. For example, AI, artificial intelligence coming into this space. But what do you see, and how do we prepare ourselves for the future of online learning and online teaching?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. The thing that I see happening here in the UK and in the US and in France as well, where I do a lot of work, is not so much, you know, some new innovative technology, but more the connection with academia and schools and industry. So having that kind of connection where schools are understanding the importance of making evidence-based decision on the technology that they need for that particular issue that they have at their school, and understanding whether indeed technology can solve that issue before they purchase it. Maybe they're even piloting the tech before they purchase it, which is amazing. And it is happening here and in the US quite a bit. And industry is actually understanding the importance of research in every stage of product development, and is actually, you know, using existing academic research and conducting their own research to understand whether their products actually do what they say they're going to do. And so this to me is very exciting, and I do see this happening. You know, it's getting bigger and bigger, but I think it just needs to be more and more important. And one of the things that, just to give an example from France, there's been a government-funded initiative since 2016 called IFRAN, which is combining industry and a local university and the school system in a region to really co-create tech and pedagogy that can be used to serve a particular educational need. And one of the projects that I just thought was amazing when I helped them evaluate this program was one using virtual reality and augmented reality in forestry education. So if you think about this, when you're teaching someone to manage a forest, you can't actually cut down trees and show them what will happen, you know, have them watch what will happen to the ecosystem if the tree is cut down, but you can do that in virtual reality. And so they were that to me, instead of just, you know, doing the same old tech and another online tutoring program and another exam prepped program, using a piece of tech to really further learning that could not happen without that piece of technology, to me is very exciting. And furthermore, this project then provided so much interesting information on how virtual reality could be used in education in general. So they did a lot of research on that. So I found that fascinating and exciting.
Excellent. Thank you. Tracy, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think just giving the focus on quality education. And so exactly what Kirsten said, that you have to choose a tool, especially if it's technology, that you can't accomplish the same thing without the technology. So I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Ruben Fuentedura's SAMR model, where he talks about sort of 4 levels of technology integration. So S in SAMR stands for substitution, where I used to write it on paper with a pen. Now I type it into a Word document, and there isn't much difference. It's just a substitution of technology for analog. Then you go into the A, which is augmentation, where maybe there's some functional difference, like using your spell checker or different things like that, that make it slightly better or faster or more usable for you than doing it on paper. Then you get into the M and the R, which are modification and redefinition. And so to me, redefinition is well, of course, is the highest level you can get to. And it doesn't mean that you aim to get like a ladder to the top and you stay there. Of course, you're going to bounce around between levels depending on what you're doing. But you always have to think about if we want to redefine, that to me would be something like video conferencing, like what we're doing here. We couldn't do it without the use of the technology. We can't be connected from all over the world at the same time in real time without the use of the technology. So that's really redefinition. So I was curious about the question in the Q&A where it was, could you recommend some tools that we can use use for free in Moodle. And of course, there are tools we can recommend, but my question is always, what is your why? What are you trying to accomplish by the use of that tool? So what do we know about evidence-based best practice? What do we know about good quality pedagogy and didactical skills? And then how can we choose the tool that works best to accomplish what you're trying to do, whether that's collaboration or connection or critical thinking or creativity or designing, or how are we going to use that technology in a way that really harnesses the power of it? We couldn't do it without. And sometimes the best technology is still pencil and paper. So really being aware of that, the goal is always good quality education, and the tools just help us achieve that. So the tools are not themselves a learning outcome. They're just a tool.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Those are very practical comments, Tracy. There's a comment that relates to student fatigue. I think, this colleague is talking about, our students sitting in front of a computer, perhaps 4 hours, 5 hours. And at some point, we see this in the classroom as well. They're overwhelmed, they're fatigued, they're not paying attention. So you all gave one very, I think, practical response to that. Vary in it, right? Vary the stimuli. Combine asynchronous, synchronous, in-person, and collaboration tools and all that. Perhaps you can, each of you can share some additional comments, observations on student fatigue and how to mitigate that.
Let me just say a couple of words. I think I really believe in group energy, because sometimes some of the some student groups have got their energy and they can actually work on their own instead of in groups, and some of the others actually prefer to work in groups. I think from the very start, a lecturer is in a very good position to understand the mentality of the group, whether or not they're more inclined for group work or more for individual work. And then once you understand that, then you can actually play it accordingly. Also, one other thing I would say, I think it's also in one of the questions, whether or not undergraduate and graduate, there should be different techniques. I think there should, but again, a lecturer is in a best position to judge for that, because of the group dynamics. Very roughly speaking, I would say that undergraduates need more leadership from the lecturers. More monitoring, and they need to be monitored maybe more closely compared to graduate students, and also of course the attention span changes from undergraduate to graduate. But I would say that instead of just going by standard applications, it would be best to judge each of the classes on their own and then act accordingly.
Excellent. Thank you, Niket. Tracy or Kristen?
Yeah, that's a really wicked problem that we're grappling with at our university. And I know we're not alone, because I've been reading about it in all sorts of things, like the Chronicle of Higher Education just recently had a series of articles about it, where, we've surveyed our staff and students, and everyone said, oh, all we want is to come back to physical classrooms. And now that we can, the classrooms are empty. And so we're very curious about the discrepancy between what people said they wanted and the actual evidence of having the bottoms in the seats. And so that's something that we're having a lot of discussions about. We're looking through literature, but of course, this is a very unique situation that we've never been through before in the world. So we're all kind of just finding our way. But I know I can share an example of something that a teacher at our Faculty of Science and Engineering just shared with me, was that she found that helping her students feel safer. So one part of that was just by making them feel more comfortable with her and establishing more of not a deep personal connection in terms of sharing too much information, but just that they felt safe with her because they knew a little bit about her as a human. in a non-oversharing way, but also just the structure of her course. So we know from research that having a well-designed course where things are laid out in a way that makes sense, that really has a high effect positively on student learning, and also having more interaction where the students feel connected both to the instructor and themselves. This is all from Preckle and Schneider. They did a meta-analysis of a lot of research. So we know that this affects student learning and also, I think, well-being. So this teacher that I was speaking of, she had made her students or requested her students to make video introductions, and the students didn't all comment on each other's, but she could see that they had all watched them because the number of views was visible. And many times, in fact, she noticed that one of the students was wearing a hand knitted sweater, and she herself is a knitter. So she started to ask questions about it. And she said, oh, I can tell that someone made that especially for you. And do you want to tell me, are you comfortable sharing it? And it was his grandmother. And this started a conversation. And then it turned out some of the students in the class were also knitters. And so they requested from the lecturer, they said, could we come to class and knit in class because it helps us feel more relaxed when we're listening? And she said, that'd be great. And then it started a conversation after class where they were asking her about knitting patterns, and it had nothing to do with her content area, but because they felt more connected with her. And this is in addition to her very clear course structure, which also gave a feeling of safety, and they've commented on a lot. Those were the two things she said she would continue doing the most in order to help her students feel safer and more engaged, both with her and with the course content. Sort of a strange example, but it really resonated with me. Just helping students feel more connected to you can help them engage.
Very interesting, Tracy, and we've also encountered the same reaction. Now that students can attend in person, they're not necessarily in the classroom, and there's a couple of comments to that from our participants as well. So, in fact, one of them is asking, how can we motivate them to come back to class? So this may be our new challenge. That we have to kind of figure out and scratch our heads and find ways. But I think you talk about, personalization goes a long way. I mean, speaking to each of your subjects, each of your students is probably the best thing we can do. So they feel like they're part of the community, but each one counts, each one stands out, each one is unique rather than a whole mass out there. Kristen, do you have any comments along those lines?
I mean, it's slightly different for schools education because most children are back, but I think some of the research that I've done in the past is on online communities, and I think what Tracy was getting at as well is this building of which the online community research shows is this building of trust. So it's not only kind of a personalization and a building of an individual relationship, but it needs to be like a community where students can feel that, they trust the other people in that community, they feel safe, and they know they're going to get something out of it if they participate. So it really is building a community if you want the students to not just, feign participation, but actually engage.
Excellent. Just in the couple of minutes that we have left, there's also a comment from one of our participants, underrepresented students. Somehow, some students who remain perhaps not so engaged or perhaps feel intimidated in participating. We have this all over the world, right? So what is it that we can do to pull those students into the discussion, into the flow of the classroom dynamics on online teaching? Any suggestions or comments there?
I'm just going to make a quick one because I don't work in higher ed, but one of the things that happens in schools, which can be used a bit, is actually, again, developing an individual relationship with that student. And so one of the things that happens in schools and happened in schools even during COVID is the teacher would actually physically go to that child's house and try to have a meeting with the parents, or try to have, even from the standing on the sidewalk outside the person's house and, shouting at a distance. But that happened a lot with one of the primary schools that I work with really closely here in the UK, is really trying to engage the student individually and engage their family as well, which is not as necessary in higher education, I know, but it's that relationship building.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with relationship building, and something we've talked about a lot during the past 2 years, because we felt so disconnected in an online setting, was humanizing. So how do we humanize our online classes and bring that feeling, like we said, of the safety, the relationships, the community back into our online teaching, which is good for the teacher, because so many people complained, oh, I just feel like I'm presenting to black screens and no one will turn on their webcams, and I feel so lonely as an instructor, but also for the students, because when they're isolated from their peers, from their social networks, from their connections, it's also very mentally challenging for them in a lot of ways. So humanization, if you look at the work of Michelle Pacansky-Brock, she's actually done a lot of work on this topic, where she's talking about working with different groups, but how this is a strategy that works for everyone. So it's really universal, but it also includes some of our more marginalized groups of students as well. So it's really powerful, and it's just all about making sure everyone feels seen and heard and valued for who they are and what they bring to the room.
Certainly. Tracy, if you don't mind putting that name and maybe a resource in the chat as well, that'll be great. This has been a very inspiring, very informative session. I learned a lot. Certainly, there's a lot of takeaways, and we get a lot of praise from participants as well. Unfortunately, our time is up. I'd like to thank especially Kristen and Tracy. You bring so much as educational specialists, folks who devote their entire career to learning process, to improve the learning process, to better educate our stakeholders here. You make a big difference. So thank you so much for all your efforts. Thank you, Niket, for bringing together this wonderful group. Again, it's been a very positive, informative discussion. We thank you all participants who joined us from around the world, over 70 folks, some of our regular participants as well as new names. So thank you for coming. And we look forward to seeing you next week on another panel. This particular panel will focus on sustainability issues in international business education. And when you log off and everybody logs off, please do respond to those short 5 questions. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.